Jesse Love was disqualified from the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Rockingham Speedway, and Trackhouse could be among the teams that could switch to Dodge in the not-so-distant future. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We've got one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's Bijan McLeod's 2025 Pigeon Forge Racing Coaster scheme that we'll see this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. This is a roller coaster that BJ and his family have designed up in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. This scheme looks really, really awesome. I love the colors on it. It's a nice look at sponsorship for sure, and I'm definitely looking forward to see this car out on the racetrack at Talladega this weekend. It looks awesome and really, really good. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Craftsman Truck Series. As it was reported by Trey Ryan, aka NASCAR Insights, that the Truck Series race in Rockingham Speedway ran 77 straight laps at the end of the event. This is now the 21st straight race the Craftsman Truck Series has won without overtime, breaking a record that's held in NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series history. This is a really big deal. We talked about this a couple years ago where the Craftsman Truck Series had been the series that had not produced the most clean racing. But over the last year or so, we've seen a lot more clean racing. We've seen a lot less wreck fest in the series. And generally, I think the series has put on some really good racing. So I think it's a really big deal nonetheless to see the Craftsman Truck Series continue to be breaking records and doing really incredible things like this. I think this is a really awesome deal for the series. Congratulations to the Truck Series on having a big record broke. And I think they're going to continue breaking that record. And I hope the streak goes a long time where we don't have overtime in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Ankrum. Now, Tyler Ankrum won his first NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race since 2019. He broke a 130-race winless streak that goes back to 2019 at Kentucky. According to NASCAR Insights, Trey Ryan, they say that Tyler Ankrum had the longest record in truck history without picking up a win. He broke the longest winless streak in truck history. This is a really big deal for Ankrum. He had dominated the end of the event. He played the strategy at the end of the race, and I think he got well-deserved and well-earned victory. He put together a very fantastic and strong performance, and I think he earned this win. Congratulations to him on breaking a record and being able to win. I think he's been close to winning the last couple of years. Happy to see him get the victory. Congratulations to him on winning and getting his first win in a very, very long time. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note. As it was sadly announced on Saturday morning that Mike Chase has unfortunately passed away at the age of 73 years old. Mike Chase, for those who don't know, was a driver that was on the West Coast. He won the Whiston West Championship in 1994. He drove for people like AJ Foyt Racing. Actually made, I believe, the Brickyard 400, the inaugural one in 1994. And he also won the 1987 Southwest Tour Championship with Featherlight as the sponsor. Mike Chase is someone who, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR history. He accomplished a lot in the sport. I think he never really got a good chance and opportunity because of how old he was at that point, because he was in his 40s and it was going to be really difficult to make a career at that point. So I do feel terrible and for him that he get the chance. And I want to send my thoughts and condolences out to the Chase family during this time. My prayers and condolences do go out to the Chase family. He had just turned 73 years old a couple days ago. My thoughts and condolences do go out to the Chase family during this time. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alpha Prime Racing. As reported by Trey Ryan, aka NASCAR Insights, that Alpha Prime Racing had two cars inside of the top 5 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Rockingham Speedway. Parker Westside would finish second in the Xfinity Series race, and Brendan Poole would finish fourth. This is the first time in the organization's history that we've seen two Alpha Prime cars inside of the top 5. This is a really, really big deal for Alpha Prime. They've been showing a little more speed in 2025. Parker Westside put together a fantastic run. Of course, he started up on the front row. He led some laps, I believe, in the race as well, and generally had a really strong and really, really fast car. And Brendan Poole survived some of the carnage at the end and was able to get a top 5. This team is continuing to click. They're showing a lot more impressive stuff, and I think they've been generally doing a really fantastic and great job throughout the year so far, and I think they're going to continue in getting better and showing improved progress and continuing to do a really awesome job. I'm really happy for them. Congratulations to them on making their own history and getting two cars inside a top 5. I think that's a big deal for Alpha Prime as the team continues to grow. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, many of you probably saw this on social media earlier tonight, but Kyle Larson was on WrestleMania for WrestleMania 41 earlier this evening. He was spotted in the audience during the WrestleMania and stuff that was going on, I believe, on USA and other networks as well. And then there was a photo that surfaced with Logan Paul and Kyle Larson and his family as well. Kyle Larson, of course, does have association with Prime, which is owned by Logan Paul and KSI. We've been seeing Kyle Larson do a lot of stuff in regards to promotion over the course of the last couple weeks, and I think this is a really big deal. Yes, I know Logan Paul is not the most liked individual in the world, and there's been a lot of reasons why, for good reasons, but I think it's still a big deal nonetheless to have someone like Kyle Larson go out and do things like this, and I think it's really big for the sport overall. I think it's a huge deal he got on WWE, and pretty exciting that he was able to prepare at WrestleMania. I think that's actually a really cool story, even though I don't agree with some of the things that Logan Paul's done. I still think it's a pretty awesome and good deal to see him get the chance to be on that show, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR Classics. As many of you probably saw over the course of the last couple days, that the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series has been officially added to the NASCAR Classics page. 41 Craftsman Truck Series races, including a winter heat race from 1994, many races from the inaugural season in 1995, also the 2023 Craftsman 150 from Phoenix, arguably one of the worst races in Truck Series history, and many other iconic races in the Truck Series history have been added to the website. I've been wondering, I was told not too long ago this was likely going to happen, where they were going to add the Craftsman Truck Series to the website from the person who runs the account, that being Tim Clark. I think it's a huge deal to see the Truck Series on there. They also uploaded some new Xfinity Series races from Rockingham as well, and they also, of course, did upload a race from 1974 as of recently. I love that the website continues to get updated. I think it's a big deal that the Truck Series is getting the recognition it deserves. I've watched some of those broadcasts. I gotta say, they do actually look really, really good for the years they are, so I think it's a pretty awesome to see that, and I think it's cool to see that the Truck Series is finally officially on the Classics page. I think that's really awesome, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Now, earlier today, of course, on Easter was the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And on the front row, we have Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. Now, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri are battling side by side going into the first corner. Max Verstappen would go a little bit wide, go off the racetrack, and would emerge as it looked like Oscar Piastri might not have given room to Max Verstappen, but Oscar did have the corner. Max would get the lead and start pulling away, but they would give him a 5-second time penalty and would have to serve that on pit road throughout the event. There was a big crash out between Yuki Tsunoda and I believe Pierre Gasly, I'm pretty sure, so they both fell out of the race, sadly, so their chance to get good finishes were not there anymore. But then once the pit stops happened, Oscar Piastri is able to emerge as the race leader, and after everyone came down pit road, he started pulling away, would have about a 4 or 5 second lead at the end, and coming off the corner, Oscar Piastri picks up a dominating clinic, picks up his third win of 2025, his fourth career Formula One victory, and he is now the points leader. He is the first Australian to lead the points in Formula One since Mark Webber back in 2010. I think he's the number one driver at McLaren right now. He's been the fastest McLaren driver all season long, and I know a lot of people focus on Lando Norris, but Oscar's not making mistakes on the track like Lando is, and I think that's the reason why I put a lot more respect on Oscar right now than Lando Norris currently at the moment. I still think it's a big deal, though, to see them be very strong and competitive. I think McLaren's the strongest team. Max did a really solid job, all things considered, but just a tough break to not being in contention at the end. Just made that mistake there, and unfortunately that penalty cost him, but nonetheless, I feel bad for Max on that front, but I still think it's a big deal. Congratulations him on picking up the win. Congratulations, Piastri, on getting it done. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jesse Iwuji. Now, it was reported earlier today by Breakcard, aka Matt, that Jesse Iwuji sounds like will be returning to NASCAR for the first time in 2025, as it sounds like he'll be making a start in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. The team is not specified in there, but when you see naval officer, you kind of can say, it's Jesse Iwuji. Now, Jesse Iwuji has not made a start in NASCAR, I believe, since 2022 or 2023. I'm thinking he's going to be driving for DGM Racing, considering he does have part ownership of that organization going into the year. I think he's likely going to drive the number 91. I don't think CJ McLaughlin's behind the wheel. Now, personally, Jesse Iwuji should personally just focus on being an owner, because honestly, him doing ownership stuff is not a bad thing. I think that's one thing about Jesse is I respect what he's done and what he's done for this country, but he just is not qualified to be a race car driver personally. He's really struggled. He probably shouldn't be behind the wheel of a race car, but he brings sponsorship to the table, and I believe Emmitt Smith is still involved working with him as well. Unfortunately, I do think he's going to struggle badly. Sadly, I don't think he's going to do a good job. And sadly, like I said, I think it's going to unfortunately be a pretty big struggle for Jesse Iwuji, as he is going to be coming back to NASCAR, sounds like, to make a few starts. Again, I question his move personally because I don't think he should be behind the wheel of a race car, but his sponsorship wants to come into play and they want him to make a start, they're going to make the decision for him. So I do think that they probably should have put someone like, I don't know, Kyle Weatherman, who's not made a single start this year in Xfinity, behind the wheel. But at the same token, same time, I do feel like he's going to struggle a bit and not do a really good job behind the wheel of that car this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the driver development program. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday early afternoon that NASCAR's changed the name of its Drive for Diversity program to the Driver Development Program. NASCAR has been planning to do this over the course of the last couple of years, according to an article that Adam Stern had reported on, and it sounds like that they've been planning to do this over the course of the last couple of years. Now, the Drive for Diversity program, I believe, has been around since 2004 or 2005. If I'm wrong in that, correct me in the comments. Now, one thing that is not going to change currently at the moment is a lot of the Drive for Diversity stuff is still going to be going on according to the article. But as of this moment right now, they're not planning to change the program itself. Just right now, they're looking to change the name currently at the moment. I think this has a lot to do with some legal stuff and politics. If you've been paying attention to the political landscape, you probably know what I'm talking about in regards to Donald Trump and some of the stuff that's been going on with the DEI stuff, among other things. But I think that the Drive for Diversity program has brought a lot to the table. A lot of drivers in the sport like Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson, and not just drivers like Torres as well, and Nick Sanchez and Roger Kroof, but pit crew members. People in the media have come through this program. So I'm not the biggest fan of this change personally, because I think a lot of people have gotten really good opportunities and really good shots to get involved in racing in some way, shape, or form. But at least as of right now, nothing is changing on that front. I don't know what Max Siegel and Rev Racing are going to do about this. I think this is a really unfortunate situation for them, but I don't think it's going to affect things, at least currently at the moment right now. Do I think it could have some effect down the road? Absolutely. I don't think there's any denying that, but it seems like right now at the moment nothing is going to change. But I do question this move a little bit, sadly, because I do think that there's some issues I have with making this move. Because again, I think the Drive for Diversity program has brought a lot to the table, and I know it's only a change right now in regards to the lineup on how they're naming it right now. But at the same token, same time, I think there's definitely some questions on it for sure. I'm not the biggest fan of making a change like this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jake Garcia. As it was reported by Chris Knight, aka Catchments.com, that Jake Garcia is expected to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway, driving number 29 car for RSS Racing. Jake Garcia has been competing full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series since the 2023 season. Last year for him was not very good with the program. He had like an 18th place or 19th place average finish and was doing about as bad as Haley Deegan had been doing behind the wheel when she drove for Thorsport Racing in 2023. But this year, Jake Garcia has been really turning the corner. He had a fantastic run at Rockingham. He finished runner-up to eventual winner Tyler Ankrum. And I think that Jake Garcia has been making the most of it so far this year. He's had a lot of really good runs. He led a ton of laps in the race as well recently at Rockingham. And I think he's earned this right and opportunity. Now, this kind of tells me he's probably part of the VOR development program in some way, shape, or form with him getting this opportunity with RSS Racing. But I do think that Jake is a very talented driver. He's been really good on the late model scene. And I think there's a very good chance and possibility that before the end of this year that Jake Garcia might get the chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. It's a great opportunity nonetheless for Jake. I do expect that Jake is going to show some good pace and great speed. I think he's going to have a good opportunity here for sure. We'll see what he can do at RSS Racing. I hope he can have a really good performance. This car does have to make the show on owner's points. They don't have a lot of owner's points to back it up currently at the moment, but I do think Jake's a very talented driver. I think he's going to do a solid job. I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity to maybe get a good finish for sure this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart was most recently on Kenny Wallace's podcast, and a podcast that I believe has been released over the course of the last couple days. But Tony Stewart was asking questions about what are two things that you could change about yourself as a race car driver. There's one situation, of course, we're not going to get into on there, involves the Kevin Ward Jr. situation, but one thing that caught my eye and was very interesting, he says that one thing that he would have changed is the way he talked to people and treated people in the sport. He said his competitive nature really came out quite a bit, and sometimes he said it came off very rude and sometimes extremely arrogant as well. One thing about this is really opens up who the real Tony Stewart is. Tony Stewart, we all know, is one of the greatest motorsports drivers in the world. He just recently won an NHRA event at Las Vegas Motor Speedway last week, and Tony Stewart has accomplished a lot in motorsports. He's won an IndyCar championship, he's won 3 NASCAR Cup championships, he's won like 10 or 11 Busch races, Xfinity Series races, including like 6 or 7 at Daytona. The guy accomplished a lot in the sport and won a lot of big events in his career. USAC champion, won the USAC Triple Crown. Of course, he's been very competitive in IMSA as well. He's won a lot of dirt races. I think he's won the King Royal, I'm pretty sure, and some other big events as well. But I think for Tony Stewart, I think it's interesting he wanted to change relationships because a lot of people feel like that Tony Stewart wasn't always the nicest person. But Tony Stewart always wasn't afraid to show who he really was. And I have a lot of respect for that person because I think that Tony Stewart was always honest and very, very fair. And it was really fair when it came to assessing things. So to me, I think I get where Tony Stewart is coming from because I think Tony Stewart wanted to show a lot of respect to people. But I think Tony Stewart earned the right with how good he's been to kind of show the arrogance that he has shown throughout his career. And I think Tony Stewart's one of the best drivers in motorsports history, but it's interesting he wanted to talk about that and was a little more open about that. Pretty interesting stuff for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Carson Hocevar will drive a 7 truck for Spire Motorsports for 4 races in 2025. His first race will be next weekend at Texas Motor Speedway, followed up by that at Kansas in the second week of May. After that, he'll race in Michigan in early June, and his final race will be at Pocono Raceway. I had heard early in the offseason that Carson Hocevar, along with the other 2 Spire drivers, were going to make starts in the Craftsman Truck Series this year. We've already seen Michael Mandela make 2 or 3 starts in the Craftsman Truck Series this season, and we've also seen Justin Healy race in the first 2 Truck Series races, or 2 of the first 3 races in 2025. So I expect the Carson to get behind the wheel. His crew chief is going to be Brian Patty. Now that 7 truck has already won so far this year. It won with Kyle Busch earlier in the season, and I think that Carson Hocevar is a very talented driver, and it's not shocking and surprising to see this move. He's going to have a lot of big shoes to fill because Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch have both been able to go to victory lane. But I think Carson has a really good opportunity to do that. He's got a fantastic crew chief that he's going to be working with, and I expect Carson Hocevar to be a major factor in serious contender to go to victory lane in those 4 races. The Spire team's been a little bit up and down, but we've been able to see Carson Hocevar get the best out of equipment. I think he's going to do an excellent job at those 4 races coming up. I look at Texas being a really good opportunity unless Kyle Busch is behind the wheel, but I think Carson will be a massive factor. I expect him to be a major threat and contender to definitely get up there and contend with the team in those 4 races this year in the Craftsman Truck Series. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart Friesen. Now, Stewart Friesen got caught up in a crash at Rockingham Speedway this past weekend on Friday night. And Stewart Friesen, after the crash had happened, he was really pissed off and really frustrated about the situation. He said he was been really frustrated with the Truck Series because he feels like the Truck Series has been becoming more and more of Wreckfest over the course of the last couple of years. And he even said on the broadcast as well, why do you even bother continuing racing in the Truck Series? I should probably go do something else that I really like to do. Now, for me, I'm hoping this is more frustration and not something that's going to lead down the road because I think Stewart Friesen actually does provide a lot to the table. One Homer Friesen Racing has been a team that's been pretty dang competitive. We've seen some really good stuff with this program, and I do think that Stewart Friesen can bring a lot to the table for the Craftsman Truck Series, but I also understand it. Look, Stewart Friesen has not been good over the last 2 years. He hasn't won a race since 2022. He's been competitive in trucks, and I think so far this year, outside of those couple races where he's crashed out, I do think that Stewart Friesen has been doing a little bit of a better job. But at the same time, I can understand being really frustrated with the way things are going in trucks. We are not up front contending for wins on a week-by-week basis. We're not going up against guys like Lane Rage, Chandler Smith, Corey Heim, Raj Kroof, any of those guys on a week-by-week basis. You are going to get frustrated. So I'm really hoping this doesn't mean that he is going to retire. I do have a bad feeling this may lead to retirement from him at the end of the year, but I don't want to see that from him. I think Stewart Friesen still has a lot to give. I still think he has a lot to bring to the table, and personally, it would be a sad day for the Craftsman Truck Series if he was to retire at at the end of the year. We're just going to have to wait and see if he does end up, in fact, retiring at the end of the year. I don't want that to happen, though. It would suck for this series. I really hope we do see Stewart Friesen continue around and being in the Craftsman Truck Series for a long time. I think he's only like 40 years old currently at the moment, so I think he's still got plenty of time to race. I hope Stewart sticks around. We'll just have to wait and see, though, if he does to go ahead and decide to stick around after this year. I think there's a chance. We'll have to wait and see, though, what happens past this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox's coverage. Now, we do have a couple Fox stories to talk about today on the channel, but we're going to talk about the Truck Series broadcast from Rockingham Speedway, because it seems like every single week we are talking about coverage on TV. Now, the coverage from Fox, honestly, this weekend, like every single Truck Series race, was honestly not very good. One, I've said this for the longest time about Jamie Little, and I'm going to say this again. Jamie Little, she is an unbelievably good pit reporter. She is fantastic on pit road. She does a great job writing all the stories on pit road going into the races, and I think she brings a lot to the table. But as a lead commentator, I cannot stand her. One, she doesn't bring the enthusiasm to the booth that you're going to be needing if you're going to be a lead play-by-play. Two, she just seems like she's all over the place and not paying attention to what is going on. The only person who was paying attention to what was going on was Carson Hocevar, who's only called 2 Truck Series races up to this point. He was not only being the color commentator, the announcer, but he was being the play-by-play guy on the broadcast as well. I just get frustrated because Carson Hocevar probably saw the criticism that the Truck Series has been getting this year with their broadcast. He probably saw that and was like, we got to do better than this. And I think Carson did an unbelievable and really great job. And I think it just shows it needs to be changes. I said this for the longest time. You need to get either Eric Brennan to be calling these Truck Series races, or you need to be getting either Rick Allen back in. I can't believe Rick Allen is sitting on a couch currently at the moment. You're telling me he wasn't available? He's doing PA work right now. Why not just get him to do the commentary? It doesn't make sense to me, and I think Eric Brennan is perfect. I think he's a perfect guy to replace Mike Joy, but I'm worried that Fox is looking to put Jamie Little as a lead commentator for Cup coverage, and I think Cup coverage is going to seriously get very unwatchable if she is a lead commentator. I don't want her being the lead commentator for the Cup Series broadcast down the road, so Fox, please, you've got to start listening. Carson Hocevar was carrying your broadcast on Friday night, and even though CW, we got issues with them that we're going to talk about here in just a second, I think that CW is so way better with their coverage, and to me, I think that Fox really needs to clean up a lot of their issues, and I think one thing they need to do is get better commentators in the booth, because I think Carson Hocevar was really the only good person in that booth on Friday, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox and the CW once again on this channel. Now, I put out a tweet that kind of went a little bit viral over the course of the last couple of days, and many of you probably saw it as well. And this revolves around remote broadcast. Now, so far this year, since I believe around Phoenix, or I think the 5th or 6th race of the year for Xfinity, every single Xfinity Series race has been remote. They've been using a studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where they've been doing all the racing and stuff. I will say, even though they've been remote, they've been better than Fox. But Fox, for some reason, this weekend, they did a remote booth. They actually have been at the racetrack for most weekends so far this year. But this weekend, for whatever reason, they were not at the racetrack. Here's my big issue with this. I have never been a big fan of remote broadcasts. I can understand if they're going to like Portland or whatever and they want to do remote broadcasts out of that track. Fine, it's understandable because there's a lot of travel and some of those people may be working on different broadcast teams at the end of the year. But I don't think there's any excuse for a broadcast being remote at a track that's less than 2 hours away from where it's taking place. You're telling me that you guys were too lazy and your group over there was too lazy for both networks to travel 2 hours down the road to cover a race. You didn't want to do it because Cup was off. I get the Cup Series is off, but I think I want to put as much of the best broadcast I can on TV. And I just don't understand what we're doing here while we're having all these remote broadcasts. It frustrates me for Xfinity especially because, like I've already mentioned, I think the Xfinity Series has been doing an excellent and really good job with their broadcasts this year. But for some weird and strange reason, they want to have all these remote broadcasts, and to me, they don't make any sense. It's questionable, it's baffling, it's mind-boggling, and it doesn't make sense. I think that broadcasts need to be happening at the racetrack. They missed stuff on both the networks this year. When you do their remote broadcasts, they're not good. They're having audio issues with Fox's coverage this year. To me, I think remote broadcasts are unacceptable and unexcusable, especially when you're less than 2 hours away. They've got to change that going forward. Are they? I don't know at this point, but I do think that that is something that really needs to change, and I really hope that's something that does get fixed going forward in the future, because right now I think these remote broadcasts are really hurting the product for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, in my honest opinion, and also the Cups or the Truck Series as well with the remote broadcasts. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Venturini Motorsports. As it was shockingly announced on Friday afternoon that Venturini Motorsports, as expected, has sold its team to Nitro Motorsports effective October 15th at the end of this year. More information came out about this on Friday. Nitro Motorsports will take over Toyota Development's efforts, and Joe Gibbs Racing and Nitro will be the two development teams for Toyota in 2026 and beyond. Now, Billy Venturini, who's been one of the owners of the organization, he is going to be the general manager through the 2026 season, so he's going to be overseeing the operation through 2026. While Nick Tucker, who owns Nitro Motorsports, he will be the owner of the program. There was a lot of chatter about this starting, I believe, back at Daytona. There was a lot of rumors circulating about this program likely selling off their operation, and it's really a sad day for ARCA. I think about Venturini Motorsports, and I get in recent years they have not been the fastest and most competitive team, but they're one of the teams that really made this series what it is. You think about a success this team has had. They've won 3 championships. Big Bill won a championship. Jesse Love won a championship. And they've almost won championships with drivers like Corey Heim. And even other drivers have come through this pipeline as well. I think about Brent Cruz, who's part of the Joe Gibbs Racing stable in recent years. Gio Ruggiero, who's made starts for the program. Venturini has been a team that's been very, very successful. And they've won 77 races across the board. But I've been hearing a lot of this happening, and again, it's just really unfortunate because of all success that Venturini Motorsports has had in this series. When you lose a team like this, it is absolutely devastating. Now, again, Nitro Motorsports is coming in. I do have a lot of faith in this program. They are probably going to have Thad Moffitt back in the program in 2026, more than likely, and I would also think that the drivers were part of the development program, like Isabel Robusto, maybe like a Weston Workman, perhaps, maybe like a Gresham Widener can make starts with this team, and I also maybe see Brent Cruz making starts in this car as well next year. But I think, again, it's just a really sad day for Venturini. And I get some of the things they did with some of the hirings, like Tony Bryden getting behind the wheel. Haley Deegan drove for the team at one point. I think Haley Lee Bryson has been almost expected to drive for the team. We've all seen Gracie Trotter drive for the program, and many other drivers have gotten the chance and opportunity to drive for this program as well. It is a sad day, in my opinion, for the ARCA series to lose a team that has a lot of history and a lot of culture to this series. It's going to be sad to see this team go, but at the same token, same time, sometimes you got to move on and do things a little bit different. But it's a shame for ARCA, but I hope that we can find a way to make ARCA a little bit more competitive at the end of this year, and I hope we can see more competitive teams showing up. I hope Nitro can do a good job next year. I have a lot of faith in that team and a lot of confidence, but we'll have to wait and see if that confidence can be delivered in 2026 with the Nitro team. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cleetus McFarland. As it was officially confirmed on Friday or Saturday afternoon that Cleetus McFarland will be running the ARCA race at Bristol Motor Speedway in September, driving number 30 car for Rhett Jones Racing. We already know that Cleetus McFarland is going to be back this weekend in the number 30 car for Rhett Jones Racing at the upcoming race at Talladega Super Speedway. He had confirmed that, I believe, on the Dale Jr. download, and he's been talking about making more starts in NASCAR and ARCA as well. Cleetus McFarland has stated publicly in the past that the long-term goal for him is that he does want to compete in the Daytona 500, and he has goals to maybe make some Truck Series starts and some Xfinity Series starts down the road as well. But he's getting started by running some of these ARCA races with Rhett Jones Racing. Now, Rhett Jones Racing has made some big hirings in recent years. They brought Greg Zipadelli from Stewart Haas Racing into the program to be one of the general managers and the key in marketing as well, which I think Greg is really going to bring a lot to the table on the competition side. But I think Cleetus is a really, really solid driver. He's showed a lot of stuff when we ran at Talladega Super Speedway last year. Or Daytona earlier this year, I should say. And I think Cleetus is going to bring a lot of eyes to the table. I expect that the Talladega race is going to get a lot of viewership. I think the race is currently on FS1. But if I was Fox, it'd be really smart considering you're going to have a lot of people tuning in. I put that race on main Fox. And also, I think there's a very good chance they're going to stream the in-car camera. If I'm not mistaken, the in-car camera for Cleetus had like 50,000 viewers. And a big reason for that is because Cleetus McFarland has a massive subscriber base. He has got one of the biggest followings on YouTube. He's got nearly, I think, over 4 million subscribers on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. And he always does a lot of crazy and kind of wild stuff on his channel as well. To me, I think this is a really awesome deal for the series as a whole, and I genuinely believe that Cleetus does bring a lot to the table, and I think he is a pretty massive and big asset as well. To me, I would really absolutely love to see him come back and make some more starts for sure, and maybe make some starts in trucks, and maybe the Xfinity Series down the road, and then maybe in the next couple years we see him run in the NASCAR Cup Series and run the Daytona 500. But I think as of right now, starting the way he is, I think is the smartest way to go at this point. To me, I think he brings a lot to the table. He's a really big asset overall, and I think it's pretty good to see that Cleetus McFarland is going to get the chance and opportunity to run the ARCA race at Bristol. I think he's going to do a really good job with the Red Jones Racing team later this year. I'm excited to see him get behind the wheel of that Red Jones Racing car at Bristol at the end of the year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. Now, this past weekend, the NASCAR Xfinity Series and the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series made their returns to the racetrack. It was the first time the Truck Series had ran there since 2013 when Kyle Larson was able to pick up his first national touring win holding off a hard-charging Joey Logano. It was the first time the Xfinity Series had raced at the track since 2004 when Jay McBride won the final race at that track. And of course, we did see a driver named Sammy Smith pick up the win, originally Justin Love, who of course got disqualified, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And we also saw Tyler Ankrum win the Craftsman Truck Series. Now, the race did end up selling out, and there's a lot of questions surrounding whether Rockingham Speedway should get a Cup Series date. Now, Bob Sargent, who is the manager and I believe the owner of Track Enterprises, which does have pretty big association with the Spire Motorsports team, he was asked a question about what is the potential possibly down the road of the Cup Series heading to Rockingham Speedway. And they said, and even Ben Kenny explained this as well this past week, it is going to be a pretty big process for us to get a NASCAR Cup Series date. We are going to evaluate it over the course of the next couple years, and I think it could happen, but it's going to take some time to get it done. Now, just on the Aura alone and just on the fact that Rockingham Speedway returned, I think is a really, really big deal. But as of right now, at this moment, I'm not sure if you want to bring the Cup Series to the track. The Xfinity Series and the Truck Series made the racing groove a lot better, and I think it made the racing really fun to watch at the event. But one of my biggest concerns with a track like Rockingham for the Cup Series, it is very difficult to pass. Rockingham is very similar to Darlington, and we saw it was to pass at Darlington Raceway, one of the most difficult tracks to pass, and dirty air was massively prevalent during that race. So I think that's one thing that could really hurt Rockingham, at least for now, getting a points-paying date. But I do have a little bit of a theory on a potential possibility of Rockingham finding its way on the schedule. One thing that I could see happening is giving the All-Star race. We don't know what the All-Star race currently at the moment is for 2026, but we do know there's a potential possibility that we may see a change of that. I have a theory that the spring Bristol date is going to go away at the end of this year, and I think that North Wilkesboro is actually going to get a points-paying date for 2026. That means you open up the All-Star race to Rockingham Speedway, working host the All-Star date, while of course you have the Xfinity Series and Truck Series getting their own event as well. I could also see it continuing to be in a standalone event for the foreseeable future, but will we continue seeing those big crowds unless you get a Cup crowd? That is to be determined, but there's still a lot of stuff they need to do to get that track upgraded, but I really, really hope that we do see Rockingham get the chance and opportunity down the road over the course of the next couple of years, maybe a chance and opportunity to host NASCAR Cup racing, but right now, because there's a lot of issues with the next-gen car, I think that's one thing we got to look at is the next-gen car does have a lot of big problems that really need to be surfaced, and there's a lot of issues that need to kind of be focused on right now, but to me, I do think that there's a lot they can do to fix this next-gen car. I really hope we do see the next-gen car fixed, because I would love to see Rockingham on the schedule, but at the same token, at the same time, it's all going to come down to what happens on the next-gen car. I think that's going to be the big thing to focus on, is getting the next-gen car fixed before we can go ahead and even think about bringing a points-paying race at the track. I hope it does happen, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen in the not-so-distant future. I think it's going to be a couple years minimum, and maybe by that point we'll have a new generation car, or we'll have better racing at the track, and the next-gen car will be fixed in its ways, but I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Catherine Legge and Legge and Sawalich. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and many of you have probably seen the clip as well, this incident that took place is probably the most controversial moment of the weekend, another controversial moment surrounding Catherine Legge. Now, with about 10 laps to go in stage number 1, you had guys like Nick Sanchez and, of course, leader at the time Jesse Love, who was dominating the event, and Legge and Sawalich was actually having a really strong and really good race. However, with about 8 laps to go, Catherine Legge, who was actually having some decent speed in the event for her standards, she was sewing a little bit off the pace and had let Nick Sanchez by. But going into the corner, we saw Legge and Sawalich not even completely make the corner, goes up the track a little bit and runs in the back of Catherine Legge. This spins her out. She gets a ton of damage, and Kasey Kahne gets collected in the incident, taking Kasey Kahne out of contention for the win. Now, obviously, because Catherine Legge was involved in this incident, there's a lot of things that need to be absolutely said about the situation. No, Catherine Legge's team paid for the ride to get behind the wheel of the number 53, but no, she was not the slowest car on the racetrack to make the event. She actually outqualified 4 or 5 drivers and would have made it if we weren't doing provisionals. One of the teams that did a provisional was the 35 car for Gray Van Alst, who, by the way, was 2 seconds off the pace. I looked at the times, and I looked how good she was in qualifying, which she wasn't great, but she was only 7/10 off the pole. So she absolutely should have been in this race. Now, I do feel bad for J.J. Yeley in this situation because I think J.J. Yeley absolutely should have been in this race, but I think that Catherine Legge and the team wanted her to get the chance and opportunity. Number 2, Catherine Legge was not off the pace as much as some were saying. I saw people saying she was 40 miles an hour off the pace. Absolutely not. I look at the times on Saturday. She was about 7/10 off of the fastest times in a race. She was not as far off as some were claiming to be. If you're 7/10 off of the Joey Gase Motorsports car, that is honestly not that bad. So there are some facts that need to be addressed. The other fact is Kasey Kahne is the only innocent bystander in this situation. I think Kasey Kahne got robbed and screwed out of a really good finish, and he's the only one, in my opinion, that absolutely doesn't deserve any blame in this situation. So looking at the crash itself, who is at fault for the incident? Now, I'm honestly going to put a little more blame toward Legge and Sawalich here. Could Catherine Legge have given a lot more room? Yes, absolutely. She probably needed to be a little bit higher up on the racetrack, and that's on her, but she gave a lane to Nick Sanchez. Yes, she crowded him down a little bit, but I think Nick Sanchez was given enough room, and he got by. Legge and Sawalich was not even in the same lane. You can see where Kasey Kahne was and where Nick Sanchez was. Legge and Sawalich was not even in that same lane, and he just straight up ran into the back of her. I understand that people are going to defend Legge and Sawalich, and some are going to criticize Catherine Legge, but to me, when I look at this, I put more blame on William. And now the second time in 2 weeks, we've seen this happen because we all go back to Bristol last week where we saw Connor Zilic have the same thing happen to him when Legge and Sawalich basically arc a brake into the back of him and just decided not to use the brakes in any way, shape, or form. I think that Legge and Sawalich should get a lot of blame for the incident. I don't think Catherine Legge is all at fault. Now, I think that they set her up for failure to run Rockingham, one of the most difficult tracks. That's on Elf Cosmetics, unfortunately, for that to happen. She was going to run the Indy 500. Obviously, that did not end up happening. But I put a lot of blame on Legge and Sawalich. Legge and Sawalich has been bad this year. 24th in the points. There's a lot of conversations about how bad he's been. And I know, understand that he got some bad luck to help him to get in that bad position too. But to me, I'm putting a lot of blame in this case on Legge and Sawalich. I think Catherine shares quite a bit of the blame for the situation, but I don't think she gets all the blame. I don't agree for her getting no blame for the incident, but to me, I look at this objectively. Legge and Sawalich ran to the back of her, and that's what caused the incident. I get that she probably could have been higher, but you got to have social awareness and you got to have awareness and pay attention to what's going on. That's the one thing about the situation is I put a lot more blame on William because he could definitely done a much better job in that case and situation, and I think he is the one who caused more of the incident overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kasey Kahne. Now, Kasey Kahne made his grand return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series this past weekend at Rockingham Speedway. He actually qualified very, very well, had really good speed in practice, was, I believe, the fastest car in the 10-lap average on Friday afternoon during practice, and also Kasey Kahne had one of the best cars on the longer run as well. He actually qualified very, very well, qualified inside the top 5. Now, early in the race on lap number 4, Kasey Kahne had a really impressive and a really, really great save going into turn number 1 and nearly wrecked the car, was able to save it and maintain his position. But on that long run in stage number 1, Kasey Kahne was starting to charge his way up to the front and was starting to climb. He was running down the leaders of guys like Jesse Love and Carson Hocevar in front of him, probably because he had a legal car at that point, unfortunately, but he was running up there. And then all of a sudden, we just talked about it, but the Catherine Legge and Legge and Sawalich incident happens, and Kasey Kahne gets clipped in that and has a lot of damage. Now, Kasey Kahne was able to get back on the lead lap and get a very solid finish, finishing inside the top 15 and finishing 14th. And considering the fact that he basically got caught up in an incident, I think that's a successful day, all things considered. Now, the big question a lot of people are wondering is, will Kasey Kahne potentially make a return to NASCAR down the road in 2025? Well, according to what Kasey Kahne said after the race, he is definitely open to doing more races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. And it might end up being with Rich Schultz Racing and the number 33 team. I honestly would love to see Kasey Kahne come back and do racing once again. I think he generally has it still. He is very, very good. Kasey Kahne, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR history. He's someone who contended for championships at times, and Kasey Kahne is someone who can still get it done. And Kasey Kahne doesn't even look like he's really aged over the last 10 years or so. The guy doesn't really age. He's like 45 or 46, but the guy is still performing at a very high level, and I think he did an overall amazing and a really great job. And if not for the fact that Kasey got caught up in that incident, I think he honestly could have contended for the win. Now, if Kasey is to return, could it be with RCR? Again, I think that is definitely certainly possible for sure that it could be with Richard Childress Racing, but I'll throw out a possibility, and that is Junior Motorsports. Dale Jr. did tweet in support of Kasey Kahne making a couple more oval starts in 2025. I was thinking about this for a second ago. There's a number that Dale Jr. has been running this year with two drivers, Shane Van Gisbergen, Ross Chastain, and Connor Mosack also announced earlier this week to drive the number 9 machine. What number do you think that is? You guessed it, the number 9. The number 9 is a number that's been very synonymous with Kasey Kahne throughout his racing career. That's the first number he drove in the NASCAR Cup Series when he joined Abraham Motorsports, where he almost won race as a rookie in 2004. And I think about all 6 he had in the number 9. Now, obviously, he can't do it in the Cup Series right now because that number is owned by Chase Elliott, and Chase Elliott associates more with that number than Kasey Kahne at this moment with the Elliott family. But I think Kasey Kahne with Junior Motorsports would be huge, and I would love to see him drive a Junior Motorsports car for 9 weeks. But honestly, with RCR right now, it wouldn't be a bad decision to go to RCR and drive for them at this point too, because I think that's a team that is very competitive right now. And I think Kasey wants to be with a competitive team and go out there and continue to break records. I really want to see it happen. I absolutely would love to see Kasey Kahne come back into the sport and make more starts because, again, I think Kasey Kahne did a really good job. I wasn't sure how he really was going to do, but to me, I think he did a phenomenal and an incredible job behind the wheel with RCR. And if RCR wants to run to 33 once again, which we might see Kyle Busch behind the wheel of that car at some point later this year, maybe like Charlotte near the end of the year or middle portion of the summer, perhaps, once we do get to Memorial Day weekend. But I really think that Kasey Kahne has still got it. He's got what it takes. Again, I think he did overall a very sensational and really, really good job. And we've seen a lot of drivers come out of retirement in recent years, like Eric Almirola coming out of retirement to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing for quite a few races, Kasey Kahne coming out of retirement, Jimmy Johnson coming out a couple of years ago, Carl Edwards at one point being interested even though Carl's not coming back. We know that Kurt Busch is also interested, but it sounds like he's not at this moment coming back with all the other stuff he's doing currently at the moment. To me, though, I really want to see this happen, though, for Kasey Kahne to come back. I think he generally either drives for RCR or Junior Motorsports, and he's contending because the JRM cars are really fast. They are the strongest team currently at the moment right now, and I do want to see them come back and make more starts regardless of what team he's driving for. So we'll see what happens in regards to what happens with them, but I absolutely would love to see it happen where we do get the chance and opportunity for Kasey Kahne to make more starts and race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series more down the road, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, we kind of talked about some of this stuff on the channel on Friday, but Doug Ivey compiled a lot of interesting stuff from the Jordan Bianchi mailbag questions where there was a lot of interesting stuff. We talk about Chicago from that mailbag where Chicago might be coming back in 2026. We talk about potential possibility of Rockingham being on the schedule, which right now it doesn't sound like it's certain that that is going to happen for 2026. And Chicago is a little bit unknown with San Diego potentially replacing it as well. But there's two interesting things surrounding Trackhouse Racing. The first one revolves around silly season, and the other one, interestingly, revolves around Dodge. Let's first begin with silly season. According to Jordan Bianchi in the same mailbag article, it sounds like they're in a very difficult position between three drivers for the car for 2026. They have to decide between Connor Zilisch, who is arguably the best prospect in the lower series currently at the moment, who is making multiple starts currently at the moment in the NASCAR Cup Series. He is going to run the Coke 600 with the 87 machine with Red Bull as a sponsor. They have to choose between the young driver who is very, very good, or they have to choose the one of two veteran drivers, Daniel Suarez or Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, I realistically think that, yes, Shane Van Gisbergen has not been very good on the ovals this year. But I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is still a really good driver, and I think he's eventually going to figure out this next-gen car, and I think that SVG is a good enough driver to stay behind the wheel. And another reason why I think SVG is going to stay with this program for next year is because of the fact of the Red Bull connection and the 9 connection as well with Junior Motorsports. So then the big question revolves around who's going to drive this third car for Trackhouse next year. Is it going to be Suarez or is it going to be Connor Zilisch? I'm leaning toward Connor Zilisch at this point right now, and here is why. Again, Daniel Suarez has not driven a Junior Motorsports Xfinity Series car, while Ross Chastain and Shane Van Gisbergen had. And number 2, Pitbull left the team in recent months. From what I know and understand, it sounded like one of the big reasons why Pitbull might have left the team, maybe because there were some disputes among contracts, among other things. I'm not entirely sure. But I think that's one thing that really caused Pitbull to leave the team. So if Suarez is the one that's kicked out from the program, where does he go? I think he goes to Kaulig Racing next year and replaces Ty Dillon. Now, we'll talk about Ty Dillon in a second, but I think Suarez goes over there because of the connection with Ty Norris. Ty Norris is over at Trackhouse at the beginning, and I think that Suarez really is good friends with him. So I do believe there's a very likely possibility that happens. So I think that you see Ty Dillon go to Xfinity and replace Josh Williams, and I do think that's going to happen there. Now, their side of the story revolves around Dodge. Now, obviously, we know that Dodge is expected to return to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. We haven't heard anything officially confirmed from sources at this point, but it does sound more than likely at this moment that we could be seeing Legacy, but GMS Racing potentially switch to Dodge next year and come back to the Truck Series next year with Spencer Gallagher driving, but there's been nothing officially confirmed on that front at this time. But I think that Trackhouse is the one that's really, really interesting. And talking about Dodge, we know that there's some teams looking to switch for their truck programs next year. Even Tony Stewart kind of confirmed that is likely very much happening next year. But I think Dodge with Trackhouse would certainly be very, very interesting. I don't believe any of the drivers have Chevy development contracts, to my understanding. I think guys like SVG, Connor Zilisch, and Ross Chastain are more loyal with Trackhouse than they are with Chevrolet. And I think about the friction with Chevrolet and even Ross Chastain. Trackhouse is never going to be the number 1 or number 2 team as Chevrolet. Very similar situation to Joe Gibbs Racing. Joe Gibbs Racing was a Chevrolet team in 2007, and they were good like Trackhouse was, but they were never great. So I think them being like the first Dodge team would be huge, because what happened for JGR? Well, when JGR, of course, went over and switched, they were able to be super fast and really, really competitive, and they were able to contend for a championship pretty much right off the dot. So I think that's what most likely is going to end up happening is Trackhouse. If they are to switch over, I think they'd be the team to go over, and I think they actually be a lot more competitive. Because they're a team that's struggling a little bit right now, and they're floundering a little bit currently at the moment. Now, I think it's going to be a couple years before this happens. I don't think that they're going to be the only team that likely switches. I could see Kaulig Racing switching over next year, or in the next couple years, to Dodge. I think that would make a lot of sense. But the one thing that could hurt this possibly is if Connor Zilisch goes there and Junior Motorsports gets involved, which I did predict in my silly season predictions that many of you probably saw earlier today. I did predict that more than likely that we're probably going to see Junior Motorsports get involved in some way, shape, or form. But that way, in some way, shape, or form. But I would absolutely love to see Trackhouse switch to Dodge, and I think they'd be the perfect team to go over. Some mentioned Legacy, and I think if the GMS Racing truck team returns, I do think there's a very realistic opportunity for that to maybe end up happening. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to the rest of this silly season about Dodge, right? Because I think you're going to be seeing a lot of silly season moves happening a lot earlier this year, and I really do want to see Dodge come back. I'd love to see Dodge come back to the Cup Series and Truck Series, because right now it sounds like the earliest we see them in Cup is 2027. I'm leaning toward 2028 at this point right now as the most likely opportunity on that front, but I think it's going to be interesting to follow and see what happens in regards to Trackhouse Racing and Dodge. I think that's going to be the big story going forward as well, and we'll keep an eye up to that as time progresses and goes on in regards to Dodge and Trackhouse Racing as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jesse Love and Justin Bonsignore. As it was officially confirmed after NASCAR Xfinity Series race had concluded from Rockingham Speedway that both Jesse Love and Justin Bonsignore were disqualified from the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Rockingham Speedway. This is a really big deal for both drivers, mainly Jesse Love, because Jesse Love had actually been the original winner of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Rockingham Speedway. But he failed post-race tech at the end of the day, and same thing goes for Justin Bonsignore. Now, I'm just going to get the Justin Bonsignore thing out really quickly. The reason Justin Bonsignore got disqualified from the NASCAR Xfinity Series race is because he had 3+ loose lug nuts on the car. Very similar what happened to Corey Heim last year at Charlotte, I'm pretty sure, where Corey Heim got disqualified not because of something that was broken on the car or anything, but because he had 3+ loose lug nuts on the car. There's a rule in the Xfinity Series where if you have 3 or more lug nuts that are loose on that car, you're going to get disqualified from the event. Tough break for Justin Bonsignore, but let's be real and honest, Justin Bonsignore had ran and struggled all day, crashed out of the event. So for him to basically fall out of that race and still get disqualified, not a really good look. But the big one is Jesse Love. I believe it's the first time that we have seen the original winner of the race in Xfinity since like 2019, like going back when Denny Hamlin had originally won the race at Darlington, but Cole Custer got the win. The reason that Jesse Love got disqualified is because there was something low in the rear suspension and the violation in the car. Now, according to what NASCAR did say, Bob says it's a rule violation on the Jesse Love car. NASCAR has this rule in there saying that the spacer and pinning angle shims must have singular panel mating surfaces. All mating surfaces between the truck trailing arm and the U-bolt saddle must be in complete contact with each other. What that means is that something in the rear trailing arm was basically not completely connected with each other, and that's the big reason why Jesse Love was disqualified. Now, I feel terrible for Jesse Love because Jesse Love, in my opinion, had absolutely earned this win before the disqualification. Jesse Love had put together a fantastic and great day. He had led, I believe, the second most laps. Ryan Segan led the most laps with 77. But Jesse Love overall had the fastest car in the race. His biggest competitors most of the day were Brandon Jones, Carson Hocevar, and Kasey Kahne early in the event. But of course, those guys got caught up in issues and wrecks. But the way he lost this race is very unfortunate. But this is not the first time we've seen the winner of the race get disqualified, even in the last couple years, including earlier this year with Parker Kligerman. Parker Kligerman was the original winner of the truck race at Daytona, but he failed post-race inspection and lost that, and of course, Corey Heim was declared the winner of the race. They actually did go ahead and appeal it, but they lost their appeal within the next couple days, and Corey Heim would then still be declared the winner of the race. Then going back a couple years ago, I believe to 2022, we had obviously the big one where Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch finished first and second at Pocono, but they both failed post-race because they had FISA tape on their car, I'm pretty sure, and Chase Elliott was declared the winner of the race. And then we've seen other times like Eric Jones to get disqualified. We've all seen Eric Jones get disqualified twice up to this point, and we've seen other drivers get disqualified after it looked like they were going to win. Ross Chastain in 2019 at Iowa had originally crossed the line first, but he failed post-race inspection, and they gave the win, I believe, to Brett Moffitt, if I'm not mistaken, which was his first win with the GMS racing team and organization. I feel bad for Jesse Love in this situation because Jesse Love is not the one that works on the car. That being said, for Sammy Smith, this is a really big deal. Now, that's a big deal at the moment because at the time I'm recording this video was about 11 Central Standard Time on Sunday evening. They have not announced if they are going to appeal disqualification. I would not be shocked or surprised if you see Rich Schultz Racing go ahead and appeal disqualification. The last time they had a big penalty come out like the Austin Dillon situation, they appealed it. They appealed it multiple different times. They lost every single appeal, and they just gave up eventually after going through multiple appeals officers, and they're still able to lose their appeals. I would expect that RCR is going to try to appeal it, and I think you're going to see a statement come out at some point, maybe this morning. Maybe they decide to let it go, though, and not go ahead and appeal it. And if they can present evidence that can win them the case, maybe they can go ahead and do it. But as of right now, Sammy Smith's the winner of the race. You think about Sammy Smith. First win of the season at the moment for him. I think that's his third career Xfinity Series victory. Sammy Smith has been solid this year. He's had good speed. I get that he had the issues he had this past week, or a couple weeks ago in Martinsville, but I think he's redeemed himself the last couple weeks. He hasn't driven like an idiot on the racetrack and has raced a lot more fair and clean. The way he handled himself after the Xfinity race at Rockingham, seeing that the move that Justin made on him was fair racing. That's the way he needs to be. He needs to be able to handle that, and I think he's done a much better job on that front. And it's the first win for him with the second win with Junior Motorsports, first non-super speedway win with Junior Motorsports, and third win at this point. I think this 18 strong. The Junior Motorsports cars are really good. 3 of the 4 JRM cars have gone to victory lane at this point. Sammy Smith, Connor Zilisch, and Justin Allgaier, and I do think that you're going to see a win coming for Carson Hocevar very, very soon as well. At the end of the day, though, it's a big deal for just Sammy Smith, but I feel for Jesse Love. Some other big changes happen here. Parker Westside moved up to second. Brendan Poole moved up to fourth. Connor Zilisch, after kind of a down day, finished 13th. Kasey Kahne got 14th because of this. Matty D, I think, moved up inside the top 20, I'm pretty sure. Justin Allgaier moves up to 22nd. Carson Hocevar, who had one of the strongest cars, I think he moves inside the top 15, I'm pretty sure. And some other drivers make big changes and big moves up to the top of the leaderboard as well. Harrison Burton finishes third, which is the best finish for the AM Racing team ever after this qualification. They finished no better than fourth coming into this race. That change of Burton getting third. Haley Deegan couldn't even get a top 10 with this team, so that's big for Harrison, and the team has really showed a lot of improvement. They've gotten a lot better, but I'm happy to see that team having success, and I'm also glad to see that we figured out the inspection issues. Again, I feel terrible for Jesse Love because I've already mentioned this already, but I think Jesse Love had earned the win originally, but if your team makes a mistake and they mess with the car, you're going to get disqualified, unfortunately. Sucks to see stuff like this happen for him. But unfortunately, the rules are the rules. Again, we'll just have to wait and see if they're going to go ahead and appeal it at this time. I think there's definitely a chance they are going to appeal it, but we'll just have to wait and see if they do go ahead and decide to appeal it. But again, I kind of feel for Jesse Love because he's not the one who works on the cars. And it seems like he's taking it very easy. He's not really getting mad about it. He had jokes between Connor Zilch and Jesse Love on social media last night, which I thought were really funny and pretty hilarious. It seems like he's taking it lightheartedly. He said, I guess I got a safe now where I can hide the trophy, which is really funny. I think Jess Love's going to be able to handle it, and I think he's going to win races this year. That young man, he had a really good car at Rockingham before the disqualification. It's a tough situation overall. I feel for Jess Love, but sometimes just don't have your team cheat, and you might be able to keep the wins with your cars, in my opinion. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Listeners below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Word thoughts about the Jesse Love disqualification. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And word thoughts about the Trackhouse news around silly season with them in Dodge as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major news breaks later today, we'll discuss here live on the channel. If not, the next time you're going to see me will be tomorrow when I'm going to be doing the entry list for the Jack Links 500 at Talladega Super Speedway. And I also on Wednesday will have a NASCAR news video drop more than likely, and we should have the Xfinity race picks dropping. And then on Thursday, we're going to have the Cup race picks for the Jack Links 500, and we're also going to have the paint scheme video dropping as well. Then Friday, we should have a NASCAR news video dropping, depending on if we've got practice qualifying. I don't remember if we do or not. We might do reactions to Xfinity qualifying as well. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we're going to have reactions to Talladega. We might have an SVG video coming out, depending on how he does. We got content coming up, people like Haley Dean, Shane Van Gisbergen, Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Junior Motorsports, Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, KSI, other people like Cleetus McFarland, Matt Benedetto, Eric Almirola, Chandler Smith, and other people in the industry as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.